I was joking and mocking my husband in front of my friends, as I usually do to belittle him in their presence. Suddenly, my husband approached and calmly said, "It's all over between us." In that moment, I felt like my life was falling apart, and my heart shattered as I watched him walk away, leaving everything behind. My name is Olivia, I'm 23 years old, and I think I just ruined my entire life. It all started on a beautiful Saturday afternoon in the quaint town of Millbrook, nestled in the rolling hills of upstate New York. The air was thick with the scent of grilling burgers and the sweet perfume of blooming lilacs. Our neighbor Mrs. Parson was hosting her annual summer kickoff party, an event that had become somewhat of a tradition in our close-knit community. I was standing with a group of women I considered my friends, holding a glass of chilled rosé and giggling at a joke my husband Ethan was telling. He was over by the grill, flipping burgers and chatting with the other husbands. He caught my eye and smiled, that same warm, loving smile that first captured my heart 5 years ago when we were still in college. I should have smiled back. I should have excused myself from the group and gone to thank him for being such a wonderful partner. Instead, I rolled my eyes and turned back to my friends, launching into yet another story about how Ethan had bent over backwards to please me earlier that week. "You wouldn't believe what Ethan did the other day," I said. I mentioned offhandedly that I was craving sushi from that place in the city, you know, the one that's impossible to get reservations for. Well, the next day, he surprised me with a reservation for that evening. He'd apparently called in some favor with a client just to get us a table. The women around me were envious, but I wasn't finished. When we got there, I decided I wasn't in the mood for sushi anymore. I wanted Italian instead, and you know what? Ethan just smiled, canceled our reservation, and took me to that little trattoria down the street. And he didn't complain, I laughed, shaking my head. I swear, that man would bend himself into a pretzel if I asked him to. Sometimes, I wonder if he has any backbone at all. The laughter that followed my words was cut short by sudden silence. I turned, my stomach dropping as I saw Ethan standing there, his face a mask of hurt and disbelief. I began to speak, but he cut me off with a sharp shake of his head. "We need to talk," he said in a low, controlled voice. He led me away from the group. I could feel everyone at the party looking at us, my cheeks burning with shame. But part of me was still in denial about the situation. Surely Ethan would forgive me, he always did. We stopped at the far end of the yard, hidden from view by Mrs. Parsons' hydrangea bushes. Ethan put the plate of burgers down on a nearby table and turned to face me. His usually warm brown eyes were cold and distant. "I'm done, Olivia," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Done being your punching bag, done being the butt of your jokes, done being disrespected by you and everyone else, because you've made it clear that I'm not worthy of respect." His words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled back, shaking my head in denial. "It was just a joke," I said. "You know I didn't mean to humiliate you in front of our friends, or make you feel like less than a man, or take advantage of your love for me. I'm sorry, Ethan, please." "Olivia, you never considered how your actions affect others, including me," he said, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I've put up with it for years, thinking that if I just loved you enough, if I just tried harder, you'd see me, really see me. But you don't." I reached out to touch his arm, but he flinched away, sending a spike of pain through my heart. "Ethan, I do see you. I love you. Please, let's just go home and talk about this." He shook his head, a bitter look on his face. "Olivia, I'm leaving. When you get home, your things will be packed and waiting for you on the porch. I don't want you in the house anymore." The finality in his voice sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't like our usual arguments where I could persuade him to change his mind, or where Ethan would eventually give in to keep the peace. This was different. This was the end. "You can't be serious," I said, my voice rising in panic. "Ethan, this is our home, our life. You can't just throw it all away over one stupid comment." "It's not just one comment, Olivia," he said quietly. "It's years of comments, years of disrespect, years of me giving everything I have to this relationship while you take and take and take." He looked at me, the pain in his eyes making my breath catch. "I love you, Olivia. God help me, I probably always will. But I can't do this anymore. I won't do this." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing alone among the hydrangeas. The sounds of the party were a stark contrast to the turmoil in my heart. I watched him make his way through the crowd, stopping briefly to say goodbye to our host before disappearing down the street towards our house. Our house. That thought jolted me into action. I hurried after him, ignoring the curious stares and whispered comments from our neighbors. By the time I reached our home, a quaint two-story colonial we bought just a year ago, I was out of breath. Ethan was already inside. I burst through the front door, calling his name. The sight that greeted me stopped me in my tracks. Ethan was in the living room, methodically packing my clothes into suitcases. I pleaded with him, moving to grab the shirt he was folding. "Please, Ethan, let's just talk," I begged. But he shot me a look and pulled the shirt away from me, his jaw tight. "Olivia, I've made my decision. But you can't just kick me out," I said, desperation creeping into my voice. "This is my home too." "Actually, it's not," he replied calmly. "The house is in my name, remember? You didn't want to be tied down with a mortgage." That conversation came back to me. I'd pushed for Ethan to buy the house on his own, saying it would be better for our finances. But in reality, I thought it would be an easy way out if things ever got tough. I never imagined it would backfire on me like this. Ethan, please, I begged, tears streaming down my face. I'll do better. I'll change. Just give me another chance. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes, but then he shook his head, his resolve hardening. Olivia, I've given you chances. Too many chances? It's too late now. He finished packing my clothes and moved on to my personal items. I watched helplessly as he efficiently packed away my life, occasionally asking me where I wanted certain things. The surreal nature of the situation made me feel like I was watching a movie of someone else's life falling apart. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across our once happy home, Ethan carried the last of my suitcases to the front porch. I stood in the doorway, feeling lost and small. Where am I supposed to go? I whispered. Ethan ran a hand over his face. For the first time, I noticed how tired he looked. The lines around his eyes seemed deeper than I remembered. Call your parents or one of your friends. I don't know, but you can't stay here. What about us? I asked, clinging to the last shred of hope. Is this really it? He looked at me with a mixture of sadness and determination. Yeah, Olivia, this is really it. I'll have my lawyer draw up the divorce papers next week. He led me gently but firmly onto the porch and closed the door behind me. I heard the lock click into place with a chilling finality. I sank down onto the porch steps, surrounded by my hastily packed life, and let the tears flow freely, overwhelmed by the weight of my mistakes. The consequences of years of thoughtlessness and disrespect finally hit me.